Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mastering Dungeons. I am your host, Shawn Merwin, and I am here with the one and the only, the Emmy Award-winning Teos Abadia. How's it going, Teos?
I want to thank you for your Emmy that you gifted me.
I just assumed that you won an Emmy or something.
I don't think I've even been in the running for an Emmy. But I did once submit things to the Emmys.
Oh, no, I said Emmy.
Right. Well,
Emmy.
Both.
Okay, close enough. Close enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, my slighting, it's classic how people talk about the time I almost won an Emmy.
Yes.
Isn't there one for opera? I think I was up for that one too.
Maybe costume design, something like that.
It was close.
Okay.
But it was because of Hollywood.
Right. Yeah, you have to have goals.
What are we talking about? How are you, Shawn? How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing okay. The onslaught of D&D news continues, and it has addled my mind, obviously. And the big announcement for people who have been fans of D&D for a while is that Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman have formally announced a new Dragonlance novel trilogy.
But how new?
Well, it's so new, it's classic.
There we go.
Yeah. And in fact, I think they really highlighted that fact that it was a new 3-book series of classic Dragonlance novels. And classic and Dragonlance have been highlighted, put in italics, emphasized, which makes you wonder if there's a difference between that and something else.
Well, new fans don't remember when new Dragonlance came out and people were pouring it in the streets.
Right. Yes, because they wanted the old Dragonlance
flavor. Yeah. That's
a
new Coke joke. But a new 3-book series will return fans to the most beloved characters from the original novels, along with introducing a new strong protagonist.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sure. I guess. Yeah. It's probably true.
Have you read the books recently?
I have not. Well, I did reread Autumn Twilight recently.
The first 1984 novel.
Yep. And that was enough for me to remember what it was about.
Yeah.
And of the 190 Dragonlance novels that came out, I probably read 12 of them.
Oh, that's pretty good. I probably read 9 or actually no, probably pretty close because I read some of the dwarf ones when I was in my super dwarf inspiration mode. Mm-hmm. And the first 6, I mean, I think I read them in college and freshman years when I started them, I loved them. They were great. Mm-hmm. But I do think they probably need some sprucing up. And what's not clear here is how much this is a sprucing up versus a retelling. I mean, you're adding a whole new protagonist. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see where it goes. It'll be interesting to see the reception. For me, that they were always fine D&D novels. And my bar for D&D novels was much lower than my bar for, other types of reading that I was doing at the time. Yeah. And that's okay. I didn't want, high literature in my fantasy reading, and I just wanted some escapism, and that's, I loved D&D, and that fit the D&D mold greatly. So it will be interesting to see both what these novels come out to be, as well as what it means for Dragonlance, the setting as a whole within the D&D realm.
Yeah, the announcement that came today from Monday from Margaret Weis is watch for additional news from Weis and Hickman about classic Dragonlance and other projects on the horizon in the coming months. And those are words that kind of purposely say everything and nothing at the same time, I think.
Mm-hmm. Right.
At least that's the way they read to me. Like, this could mean I'm going to talk to you about the other things I do in my life, or it could mean we've got a bigger agreement with Wizards to do more Dragonlance stuff. It's unclear.
Right.
We really don't know if there's more to this than 3 novels. And they write it as multi-year agreement, but, it's 3 novels.
That could be the multi-year agreement. Right?
That could be all of it. So
right.
it'll be so fascinating to see where this actually goes. And I think Dragonlance is a setting that has had novels people really love, but you don't hear that many people talking about the great run through the Dragonlance adventures or their amazing Dragonlance campaign, because it was a world that did not facilitate, I think, that.
Right. Right. It lets you play the novels, those adventures, sort of, right? And so people loved it for the novels and for, I guess there were comics and other, peripheral things, but the adventures themselves weren't at the top of everyone's, best adventure list when they come out every year. What are the top 50 adventures? Maybe one of them will be on the list.
Yeah, so, it's going to be really interesting to see where this all goes.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yep. So next up, one of my favorite conventions, Winter Fantasy, is happening. It's happening in the ether, not in Fort Wayne, Indiana, but it is still happening. And I think within a week of this recording, it will have started. So tickets and games are now on sale. And as Teos notes, games in Spanish and Portuguese are being offered.
Yeah, really cool. There aren't a ton of tables, but they are there. And for people who are in South America, Central America, these games, I believe, are discounted, so they are cheaper than the other games, which is awesome. An attempt by Baldwin Games to work with those economies that are different economies, where $1 here is a lot more than $1 there. So that's a great move. I'm going to sign up for these. I've actually already signed up for some with my English-speaking friends, and I'm going to sign up for some in Spanish as well.
Excellent. And so especially if you are a fan of the Adventurers League, a ton of games there for you, and you can go to baldmangames.com to sign up, get tickets, and register.
Yeah, and it is coming up, so basically when you hear this, you want to sign up immediately,
right,
and play. But because it'll start, I think, the day that this comes out.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that's worth noting is these online games are selling fast.
Mm-hmm.
People are playing the D&D online.
Yes, they are. Since they've started that monthly game day, they've been selling
D&D weekends.
Yep, exactly. They've been selling quickly. So if you are a regular, make sure you get yourself in there. Or if you haven't been taking advantage of these online opportunities and wondering what it's all about, what it's like, now's your chance. Get in there, play a couple, see what it's like. I wouldn't sign up for the whole weekend if you're not sure that you're going to like it, but you sign up for a game or two just to get a feel for it.
Absolutely. It's great con, and it does make me a little sad from the COVID perspective, because this was the last time that I went to a convention.
True. Yeah,
and
me too.
Is that, wow. We've lost some experiences, but we have gained some others.
Yep, and hopefully in 2022, we will be in a position where we can again congregate in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Can't wait.
Balmy, warm Fort Wayne, Indiana in February. And
it puts the winter in Winter Fantasy.
It certainly does, but it's always a good time. Speaking of good times, WizKids and Critical Role are partnering to bring you new Exandria minis. You're the mini master, so you tell me about this.
I love me some minis, and all I can think of is, why didn't this happen back way when the book came out? But all right.
Yeah.
But it's here now, and it is the first 6 box sets of premium painted figures coming in spring 2021. They share what I think are, if not all of them, very close to it. There's a Monsters of Wildemount set 1 and 2. And then Factions of Wildemount that focus on different areas. So the Dwendalian Empire, Kryn Dynasty and Zorhas, Clovis, Concord, and Menagerie Coast. If you go to the Critical Role site, they have many more pictures than on the WizKids site, which has a few pictures. So you can get a look at all the different monsters that are clearly Exandria Wildemount monsters unique to the setting. So which I always love, because you can get minis that are kind of wacky and new versus another ogre and goblin. And then also heroes that are dressed in sort of the ways that represent, that art style of Critical Role and the fan art and all that comes out of the live stream, which also is to say that you get heroes that maybe look a little different, which can often be really fun to have as part of your collection. When you're playing a character, you don't look like just another rogue, but be a little more, a little more flair to your look of the mini. There will also be premium figures. So, there are the boxes that are collectible, blind, you open them and see what you get. But then there will be open, what you're getting, premium figures, which WizKids has been making such great versions of now. And then the first one is Monsters of Wildemount Udak. And this is, one of those big, beefy monsters. Pretty cool. So I'm looking forward to that. And hopefully this gets to the Critical Role fans and they go nuts and buy these all too, because I love seeing the minis market do well.
Yep. And well, if the Critical Role fans are players, we will find out, because they will buy these minis by the box load, as it were. And also a little podcast news. I joined the Tome Show along with Josh Parry, otherwise known as JVC Parry on the DM's Guild, prolific writer, to talk with Jeff and Tracy about what to do with your campaign after you finish a published adventure. You can find this on the podcast site itself or on Twitch. We have a link in the show notes. And it was an interesting discussion, which got into a lot of talk about high-level play and what high-level play means. And if you're a DM who struggles with either high-level play or trying to figure out what to do when a campaign ends, this would be a good podcast for you to watch.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I watched it, and it was great. You, the two of you, and really the four of you, had fantastic advice on the subject. It is a neat. It's a neat question, and I've had this come up where, like, I finished my Tomb of Annihilation campaign, and my friends were like, "So will we continue?" And I'm like, "No."
Right, exactly.
I do not want to make all that extra content, though I love playing with you guys.
Right.
But it is, it's an excellent question of how to handle that. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting concept, both in terms of you as the game master, but on the business side of things, when you think about it, what is the best way to handle a customer when you end what you're providing them? Well, and there are some. I
think that's a thing that the Adepts did well back when the Adepts were sort of publishing more regularly. You saw the Guild Adepts created a whole series of adventures around Mesro tied to Tomb of Annihilation, so you could continue that play with Mesro explorations. And we haven't really seen that, right? We didn't get a series of high-level adventures for Avernus or Dragon Heist or anything like that. So. Yeah. That's what the DM Guild is there for, basically, is to fill in those blanks that Wizards can't fill for you. So, but as you point out on the show, those products don't tend to sell super well because they're high level and people don't play to those high levels. So.
Exactly. Yeah. Chicken or the egg. So there is a YouTube video talking about what are the profit margins at a game store. I did not see this, Teo, so I'm interested in hearing what you have to say.
So Anubis Games and Hobby walks through in this YouTube video, kind of very informally shot, but in a fun way and in a useful way, what profit margins are like for your favorite local gaming store. And what they point out is they try to aim for 40% margins. That's like their goal, if they can do it, which is far lower than many other types of retail stores. And he kind of walks around his store and shows different products and what the margins are. And I thought it was very interesting. Like Magic the Gathering card sleeves, those transparent things you chuck your cards in to protect them, that's a 40 to 50% margin. So he's like, this is one of the best things we have, right? Or dice can be 50%. Love selling dice. But you go to like a Magic the Gathering booster box and it drops to 25 to 30% margin. And he's like, it's well below our target average, but there's such a high volume that it can be, it's certainly meaningful. It's the best thing a store sells. Board games like Settlers of Catan are 40 to 50%, but interestingly, a very popular new title can be really bad. Like he says, Exploding Kittens is 15%.
Wow.
He's like, it's almost not worth carrying, but people come here specifically looking for this, so you've got to give them the exploding kittens, even if your margin is terrible. And then he says RPG books like a 5e player's handbook are around 40%. And in the comments to this video, someone asks about the impact of Amazon. And one of the things that he says that's interesting is that D&D books are sold to Amazon sometimes $1 to $3 below wholesale prices. So how do you compete with that?
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah, and he may have other videos in this series. Again, this is Anubis Games and Hobby. Very interesting. I really enjoyed watching that video.
Excellent. For the Kickstarter portion of our news, we have Our Shores, an RPGSEA collective project. SEA standing for Southeast Asian.
Yeah. This is kind of an interesting thing, and I thought it was kind of cool to talk about because I like how this is a group of collaborators bringing what you could consider, what really are, 3 separate projects bundled together into one Kickstarter. It's almost funded, and you have until February 18th to back it. And there are 3 very creative, different Kickstarters being created, or different RPG projects being created by separate teams that are part of the same community. You have Navathem's End, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse and Forged in the Dark game, where it's really kind of cool. The pictures of this are great, of this tower at the top of this kind of pile of bones and cities, and the apocalypse is coming, and you're trying to stop it. Then you have Capitalities, which is a sort of, capital heights kind of. Is a slice of life, coming of age tabletop role playing game about young adults living in the big city as they try to find out who they are and how to kind of mature and face reality. It's a GM-less system, so sort of like Fiasco.
Okay, nice.
And then Maharlika is a techno-mystic science fantasy mecha RPG inspired by Filipino mythology, centered around mechanized weapons and their pilots, the eponymous Maharlika.
Nice.
So, 3 really neat things. And we've seen in the past the Southeast Asian community create some really neat projects. So this is another cool opportunity to back them in something that isn't D&D, but again, really cool RPGs.
Yeah, for the Adventures League, that community has been, very hardworking, very conscientious, very creative in the projects that they're doing. So it's always great to see more, even if it's non-D&D, from that area.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we are going to continue with our review of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, delving now into the fighter class and what the optional class features are in Tasha's for the fighter. Without hesitation, let us chop this down. When you choose a fighting style at level 1, these styles are added to your list of options. So the PHB, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just in case you don't remember what this was, because I had to kind of think, what are these? So the player's handbook has things like archery, +2 to attacks with ranged weapons, or great weapon fighting, you get to re-roll a 1 or a 2 with a 2-handed weapon. So it's sort of like it really is your style, sort of how you approach combat-wise. It's a basic thing that sort of propels all your other choices forward.
Mm-hmm. And so added to that list are the following. First, blind fighting. You have blind sight with a range of 10 feet. While you're within that range, you can effectively see anything that isn't behind total cover, even if you are blinded or in darkness. Moreover, you can see an invisible creature within that range unless that creature successfully hides from you. My first thought is this is great, but it is only useful in certain situations. Everything else on that list, you're always getting that +2 to attacks with ranged weapons. You're always getting to reroll. For duelist, you're always getting the bonus to damage when you fight with one hand. For the protection ones, you always get that protection. So this is something that is potentially useful, potentially super useful in a limited amount of situations.
Yeah, I can't help but think of, one of my friends who's very much the optimizer came up with the idea let's all play a party where all of us have levels of Warlock, have Devil's Sight, and then we can cast Darkness and we can all see it and fight. And this way you wouldn't have to actually be a warlock, with Devil Sight, you could just be a fighter and you'd have blind fighting and still be able to attack within that darkness. Yep. Sometimes I feel like Tasha has deliberately tried to create more builds that fit in that party.
Yeah.
It is an interesting choice as a core feature.
It is, and that's why the options like this are so problematic, because they are not useful all the time for people that just want to have something and forget about it. But the optimizers will find the way to break this, right?
Yeah.
We'll play the drow who can drop darkness. We'll play the warlock, as you say, with Devil Sight, and we'll play this, and then we'll just walk around in the dark all the time. And you as the DM then have to deal with this all the time.
Yes. Yeah.
Which make the
fun.
Game not fun. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
I also wondered whether this could have been a sort of a take on accessibility. Like, now you can be blind but see, and here's how you sort of explain it. Mm-hmm. But I would just explain that versus costing you a feature for it. So yeah, it's a little limited.
Yeah, it is. It's fine, but in certain situations it can be problematic. Yeah. That's all. Interception is the next class feature. When a creature you can see hits a target other than you within 5 feet of you with an attack, you can use your reaction to reduce the damage that the target takes by 1d10 plus your proficiency bonus to a minimum of 0 damage. You must be either wielding a shield or a simpler martial weapon to use this reaction.
Yeah, this is interesting. When I first read it, I'm like, wait, don't we already have this? And so I went and looked at the protection style, right? Which is when a creature you can see attacks a target other than you that is within 5 feet of you, very similar, you can use your reaction to impose disadvantage on the attack roll. So it's not minimizing the damage disadvantage. You must be wielding a shield. So now you don't have to take a shield. You could be wielding a simpler martial weapon. It's a little more flexible. It's interesting. And you can also do it after the hit, so you're reducing that you're having an impact or reducing damage.
Yeah. So essentially at lower levels, it's probably better to have the interception because you are eliminating probably all damage a lot of the time. Whereas at higher levels, that 1d10 plus your proficiency bonus, you're averaging what? Removing 8 or 9 points. At 15th level, that's probably not a heck of a lot. Where it might be better to impose disadvantage and have it not hit at all. So it's not terrible, just something to think about in terms of what's already there.
Yep. Next
class feature is Superior Technique. So if you are familiar with the Battle Master archetype, you have maneuvers. This will let you learn one of those maneuvers from that subclass. If and then it's got the whole thing with if there's a DC involved, use 8 plus your proficiency plus your strength or dex, and then you get a superiority die which that Battle Master subclass uses to power this maneuver.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that there is also a feat in this book that we'll get to when we get to feats, that you could add even more maneuvers. So one thing that's interesting is, especially with the new maneuvers that are in this book, you could now add in a bunch of maneuvers to really customize a character a fair bit by multi-classing fighter and taking a feat. So it could be interesting.
Yeah. Flexibility without breakability is a good thing. So that lets you do that. This next one is interesting. Thrown weapon fighting. You can draw a weapon that has the thrown property as part of the attack that you make with that weapon. In addition, when you hit a target with a ranged weapon using a thrown weapon, you gain a +2 bonus to the damage roll. One of the players that I'm playing in this new campaign with is now a dart throwing fighter.
Oh, sweet!
Yeah,
that's old school.
And making it work so far at low levels by, despite his horrible die rolling, being able to pull out and throw these weapons without having to get around this limit that there is on one drawing of a weapon per turn.
Yeah, and I think some players don't really realize that limit exists, but it will severely limit you if you're a fighter trying to do that. So this does get around that 1 per turn limit. And then you get the damage addition. So sweet. Very good.
Yep. And the last one is an unarmed fighting. And before I started this little segment here, I wanted to say and clarify that, what we're giving are our informed opinions. And they are opinions, but, based on running at least thousands, if not more than thousands of players that we know and that we don't know through many, many, many adventures. And this unarmed fighting is something that my dislike for things like grappling tend to color my judgment on anything like this. So with unarmed fighting, your unarmed strikes can deal bludgeoning damage equal to 1d6 plus your strength modifier on a hit. If you aren't wielding any weapons or a shield when you make the attack, the d6 becomes a d8. And at the start of each of your turns, if you are grappling a creature, it takes 1d4 bludgeoning damage at the start of your turn. I'm cool with that, all of that. I just don't like sort of trying to break encounters or fights by grappling or doing things. And this is more a remnant of older editions where you could do more when you grappled, right? Especially you could keep people from casting spells. You can do all sorts of terrible things to them. So this isn't that bad, and it does give someone who wants to play that sort of professional wrestler, which seems to happen at least once a convention. When I was running, 7 or 8 tables at a convention, you'd always have the one player who wanted to, jump off tables and grapple and put people in holds and so on. So this is there for them. What did you want to say about it?
No, I mean, I think you're right in that in 5th edition, grapple is not as bad at all compared to how it has been. Mm-hmm. And grappled is its own sort of condition now, right? Mm-hmm. Right. No speed, can't benefit from bonus to speed. And I think that's it, right? You're not actually restrained, I believe.
No, you're not restrained, and that's the thing, right? When you're playing with, reasonable. That's what keeps it reasonable. But that's also what makes players not want to do it because it is reasonable.
Yes, because it is reasonable.
Because you always get I grapple them. Okay, you've got them, and next round they're like, well, what can I do? Like, you can
move them,
but you can't really.
Well, when you move, you can drag or carry the grappled creature with you, but your speed is halved unless the creature is 2 or more sizes smaller than you.
Right. So but I want to pin them and let everyone beat on them and make them unconscious. No, you can't do any of that. And that's what people want, but that's the want that tends to break things. So it's this balance that they're trying to walk, and I think they do a pretty good job here of making it at least do damage if you're grappling someone. That's something.
Yeah, I just don't know that it's appreciable damage, but maybe, I mean, I think they walk a tightrope really well here. All of these are reasonable. None of them make me go, wait, well, that's crazy. And it's interesting because there is a feat that we'll see later called Fighting Initiate, which lets you choose either one of these fighting styles or one from the player's handbook. And so you could do that to be a fighter with 2 styles or to be something else that has a fighter style. And so it's even more important that nothing here be broken, right? If the game later adds something that lets you do that pin, that's where you'll see people take unarmed fighting style plus this pin thing and that's where we've got to be careful. And 5e, as it adds to its stuff, must be really careful. So far, in Tasha's here in the fighter section, they did this well, I think.
I totally agree. At level 4, then you get martial versatility. Whenever you reach a class in this level that grants the ability score improvement feature, you can do one of the following things: replace a fighting style with another fighting style that's available. If you know maneuvers from the Battlemaster subclass, you can replace a maneuver with a different maneuver. So we're seeing more of this flexibility, allowing sort of mini rebuilds as you go.
Yep, it's fine.
Yep.
Yep.
I agree. Now there are new maneuvers. Speaking of maneuvers. So if you remember, maneuvers are generally things that are powered by these expertise dice. Is that what they're called? Superiority die. Yeah. That's what it's called. They're powered by these superiority dice. So they normally let you spend a die and then roll a die to do more damage or do other things as the fighter. So one of them that we have new is called Ambush. When you make a dexterity stealth check or an initiative roll, you can expend it one superiority die and add that die to the roll, provided you're not incapacitated. I like it.
Yep.
Both of those things can be very important depending on the situation, and it's a good use for a die.
It is interesting that it's when you make, not someone else in your party. But when you've got to do that thing in the encounter, then I want to go earlier. Let me roll that die.
Yep, for sure. Bait and switch is the next maneuver. When you're within 5 feet of a creature on your turn, you can expend one superiority die and switch places with that creature, provided you spend at least 5 feet of movement and the creature is willing and isn't incapacitated. Okay, that's important. I didn't see that earlier. This movement doesn't provoke opportunity attacks. Roll the superiority die until the start of your next turn. You or the other creature gain a bonus to AC equal to the number rolled.
It's the old switcheroo.
Yep, the old switcheroo. Now, when I originally read this, I didn't see it say the creature must be willing. Because I thought, wait a second, if you start doing that with unwilling creatures, you can wreak a lot of havoc. Oh, yeah. But now I will remove my note because I have learned. Next,
to read.
Yes, I've learned to read. Reading comprehension is important. Next, we have Brace. When a creature you can see moves into the reach you have with the melee weapon you're wielding, you can use your reaction to expend one superiority die and make one attack against the creature using that weapon. If the attack hits, add the superiority die to the weapon's damage roll.
So this is that old, like, AD&D would have, like, setting your spear, and I think Third had it too, like, where something would charge at you and would take double damage. So this is sort of that concept, right? You're like, I'm going to brace my weapon for them, and then when they move into me, I'm ready for them, and I jab them with whatever I'm holding. It's kind of fun.
Yeah. How does that work with things like Sentinel, the feat Sentinel?
So it doesn't interact, and this is, again, another good example of Tasha's design being sound, because Sentinel feat feeds off of opportunity attacks, and this is not an opportunity attack. It's a reaction that is not called an opportunity attack. It's not due to them leaving your space. They're coming into your reach.
Gotcha.
So it is completely separate from it. So this, and because this is using your reaction, which is also what you need to take an opportunity attack, then you can't do both. Which is great. In the past, editions would have that problem where you got more and more out of things like an opportunity attack or something like that. So I liked it.
All right. Does this interact anyway with Polearm Master? Let's see. While you are wielding a glaive, halberd, pike, quarterstaff, or spear, other creatures provoke an opportunity attack from you when they enter the reach you have with that weapon. So it's essentially it doesn't use opportunity attack, but it lets you make an attack, but it doesn't give you any bonus to the damage. Huh. Interesting. I just thought of Polearm Master, so I just brought it up real quick.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I have no problem.
One thing that's nice about this is that it is usable off turn, and you are making an attack. So if you have things like sneak attack, right? I can see a rogue that wants to take this because you get that extra ability to do off turn attacks and get sneak attack to it, since sneak attack is per turn, not per round. So there's some possibilities there. Looks cool.
Okay, sweet. And next is Commanding Presence. When you make a Charisma Intimidation, Charisma Performance, or Charisma Persuasion check, you can expend one superiority die and add the superiority die to the ability check. I'm happy. Give me some of those sort of skill-based options. Yay.
Yeah. That's cool.
Grappling strike. Immediately after you hit a creature with a melee attack on your turn, you can expend 1 superiority die and then try to grapple the target as a bonus action. You can add the superiority die roll to your strength athletics check. Thoughts?
Yeah. So this is interesting because you can now get that grapple without having to take the grapple action.
Mm-hmm.
You can get it as part of an attack, with this, and you can't do it all the time because you got to spend your superiority die, but you can sometimes do this. And so then now they're grappled, and then you'll get the extra D4 next time if you've got the unarmed fighting style. So there's some neat combinations here that makes it a little stronger. Yeah, it's fine.
Next is quick toss. As a bonus action, you can expend 1 superiority die and make a ranged attack with a weapon that has the thrown property. You can draw the weapon as part of the making this attack. If you hit, add the superiority die to the weapon's damage roll.
Mm-hmm. So here we get your synergy with thrown weapon style. Now you can spend a bonus action, spend a die, and do especially damaging weapon attacks. You'll get +2 from thrown weapon style damage, and you're getting to add your superiority die to the damage. So it's kind of nice, strong throw. Cool.
Yep. Tactical assessment. When you make an intelligence investigation, an intelligence history, or a wisdom insight check, you can expend 1 superiority die and add that die to the ability check. So again, if you run a campaign where those checks are very useful and important to the story or the game, it is a great option.
Yep.
And
I almost think they could have been not just you, but another character. But it's
to sort of assist someone.
Yeah. Just because sometimes in both these cases, you are not necessarily going to have the best. You probably will not have the best check.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that it would have been bad if you could have helped someone else by sort of making an argument, right? It's like a different, instead of doing the help action, you would do this. I don't know.
All right.
Interesting.
And I think next time we will start digging into the subclasses. The first one being the Psi Warrior.
Mm-hmm.
But now, for those of you who do not want to be spoiled on Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden, thank you for listening. But you better go out into the wild, breezy Arctic while we talk about Chapter 6, Caves of Hunger. Teos, you want to run us through the quick review of the first 5 chapters?
Yeah, Chapter 1 and 2, we started in the 10 towns, then we explored the surrounding areas. In Chapters 3 to 4, our heroes went to the Dwergar fortress, or maybe straight to stop a dragon that was attacking the 10 towns. Either way, they did both things eventually, and some of the town was burned. In Chapter 5, we go to Oral's Island to steal the Codicil of White, because it is tied to opening a passage to a Netherese flying city, which crashed in the Ragged Glacier. And maybe we ended the rhyme, but we're not sure. If so, Oral's defeated for a year, but maybe she's coming to get us. That's probably what's happening. You're going to have to figure that one out. You might at this point be accompanied by Veline Harpel, an arcane brotherhood necromancer, if you're into that kind of friend, or a sentient magic item, Professor Orb, who can tell us about the Netherese elements. And it's time to try to reach the city in Chapter 6.
And so Chapter 6, Caves of Hunger, is a big dungeon between the surface and the Lost City. And so we are going to cover it, probably taking 2 weeks to do so. We'll see how far we can get today. Yeah. Because, as we said, it is a big dungeon with lots of rooms. So the premise of this chapter is when the city crashed into the glacier, Oral sealed off. It's essentially like a mosquito in amber, right? She sealed it over so no one else could get to it. It became all hers. And so the city has been sitting there in this ice for a long time. What the characters need to do is use the Rime of the Frost Maiden poem, which will open a hole in the glacier, allowing them access to the city. But before they get to the city, they have to go through the dungeon that sort of sprang up over the years between the city and the surface. You need to know before you run the chapter whether Velen Harpel is with the characters, if the Professor Orb is with the characters with Professor Scant inside. Otherwise, you might have to bring some other NPCs into the caves to help the story along. Because
there are a couple of options inside of these caves that can sort of replace them if you need to.
True. But when you read the dungeon, a lot of it is, and if Professor Scant is there, he tells the characters this and that. And that information is, even if it's not important, which sometimes it is, it's often interesting. Yeah. It often adds to the background, to the lore of the setting. So you sort of want something there that can do that rather than roll a history check. Oh, you got a 13. Is that good enough or not? It's better to be able to give that information without having to veil it or find an excuse to give it. Having that Shawn. Professor Orb there is just great.
And maybe, Shawn, feeding off of what you're saying, maybe the thing that you want to do is just pick one or two characters that you think are the best positioned to know this sort of stuff and just highlight them. If they don't have the Professor Orb, right, and they don't have Valine with them, then just pick the one or two PCs and periodically say, hey, you know what you know because of your background? You know this.
Yeah. Oh, you're winter touched. You're touched by Auril. This is going on in your head. Or you're an archaeologist. Well, you studied this. And yeah, exactly. Right. That's the best way to do it.
Yeah, because absolutely. You should not keep these things quiet because they are a big part of the color of this place.
Mm-hmm.
What about the levels?
Well, the levels are what level you should be when you're entering. So if your characters are not level 8 by the time they are heading this way, the adventure suggests to run some random encounters to get them up to level 8. Or, just say, hey, you're level 8 because, you're a DM and you can do what you want. Halfway through the level, it is suggested that you go to 9th, I believe.
When you reach area H39, which is your exit, actually. Okay. So when you finish this, you should be 9th at the end of chapter 6.
Yep. So he did say H39, which should give you the clue that there are at least 39 rooms in this dungeon.
Maybe.
But before we get there, a little bit happens on your trek. You are met by a shaman from the Ragged Elk tribe who has received a vision that the characters are essentially the chosen ones who are going to save Icewind Dale. So he comes up to you with 10 warriors, and he asks, do you want some help getting to this place? Because he had a vision that the Tiger tribe is going to intercept them. So, yeah.
True.
It is not false. So the characters can either say, no, we got this, and send them away, which I don't see many players doing, but maybe they will. Or they can say, sure, come on with us. And as prophesied, the Tiger tribe queen, Bjornhild, I can't even try to pronounce that.
Solvingsdottir.
There you go. Comes and attacks with her pet saber-toothed tiger and 20 tribal warriors. If the characters have accepted the help of the elk tribe, they sort of hold off the 20 tribal warriors to let the characters fight the leader. Or if the characters have killed the queen or dealt with the queen earlier in the adventure, there is a frost druid who attacks with, I believe, a rhino. Or a mammoth, a mammoth.
It's interesting here that the adventure really says, well, if this leader of this tribe died, then here's who he is. So, like, if the good guys, if somehow you killed off their leader, then you get a weaker person helping you. And likewise, if you killed off the elk tribe queen, then you have a weaker opponent there. And what it impacts is, it sort of suggests that you hand wave this combat as long as you have accepted the help of the elk.
Right.
So when you hand wave it, it has results. Sort of you run off into the caves, and then a certain number of people will survive based on what scenario took place and whether you had killed anybody before. I'm curious how it plays in actuality at most tables. Like if you were to look at 30 tables that run this scene, I'm curious what DMs choose to do. Will they just always hand wave it? Will they bother playing this out? And if they play it out, why wouldn't they just do the whole fight rather than run off? I don't, it's 20 tribal warriors. The hardest part is that you have this shaman and a gladiator and the 10 warriors versus saber-toothed tiger, druid, I think also a gladiator maybe. I don't know. But you've got a couple of beefy things in the mix and that will make the thing go longer.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious how it would play off. And for all of this effort, at the very end of this chapter, it's going to tell you something very interesting, which is if you remember, and I don't remember her name. I got to look it up. Avarice.
Yes.
From the 10 Towns chapter 1, I think, where she's at the bottom of a dungeon in Conig or Denival. I can't remember which one. We get a note saying she's going to show up.
Yeah.
So at the time that you're leaving the caverns, she shows up here and kills whoever's here anyway.
Right. Yeah. So
don't
all
overthink this. If Avarice is alive, don't overthink if you're hand waving it, don't overthink who and who's left, because they're not going to be left.
Yeah.
When Avarice shows up. So it's much to do about nothing a bit, kind of.
Yeah. So it's the old trope of your friends say, well, we're going to wait and guard the entrance for you to come out, and we'll make sure nothing comes in after you. But then when you do come out, the bad guy is there, having killed your friends and waiting for you.
Yeah. It's interesting. Very interesting.
So once you get to the waterfall, the edge of the glacier that is a waterfall, you can read the poem, and sure enough, a passageway opens, revealing a tunnel that takes you to the Caves of Hunger. The general features are, as you might expect, lots of echoing and darkness. There are some ice slides that are very, very easy to go down and very, very difficult to come up. The tunnels are 10 feet tall. The caverns are 30 feet tall. They're windy. Some of them have been carved out by Remoraz. So, it's cool to describe this cave as being formed by different things. So some of it is the wreckage from the city. Some of it's Remoraz caves. And so just, if your players are into that, make sure you play up those descriptions. Did you want to talk about the psychic hauntings?
Sure. So in addition to the neat flavor that you just described, which is actually very cool, and sort of like I feel like we're actually getting to the horror of this adventure. Like it is kind of, it's very evocative, these winding, strange, echoing, icy tunnels. And then on top of it, because of the death of all those Netherese wizards and priests and other inhabitants that were sealed in this place, the idea is that this place has locked in sort of their trauma. So at various points, the text instructs you to roll a d20 and consult this table. The table has results 1 through 12. Right. It says d12. So don't roll a d20, roll a d12.
Right. Otherwise, you have an 8 in 20 chance of being very confused.
Yeah. On a 7 to 12, nothing happens. So there really are only 6 results, which I kind of actually would have liked this to be. I wonder if this was like a space thing or something, and it was at one point a table with many more things.
I'm sure.
This is what it feels like, having been through projects. Because 6 different hauntings, I actually would like more of them and more to use. And they're little things that are, full of horror things. Like each party member sees their companion's flesh wither as black worms crawl out of their ears, noses, and mouths. This effect is illusory, harmless, and fleeting. You hear heavy footsteps behind you, and you feel hot breath on the back of your neck. And these are just great ways to get under the skin of the players. And specific rooms, again, will say that there can be a psychic haunting here, so you roll to see if it happens. Mm-hmm. I would just use these when you want.
Yeah.
And add them to build the suspense the game needs to give this place a really haunting feel, which is I think the overall strength of this chapter.
Yep. Oh, totally. I mean, the horror elements here are great to play up, and as you say in your notes, this would have been great to have done in earlier chapters. And I want to take that. I want to take this a step further. One of the powerful elements of narrative, of storytelling, is repetition and slight changes in repetition. So think of the story of the Three Little Pigs, right? One of the first stories we learn. What's that story? It's the same thing happening 3 times, but at the third time there's a different outcome. So that's the power of that story. The theme, obviously, build your house of bricks, but the method that you get to do.
Spoiler, Shawn.
Yes,
spoiler.
I know. I'm sorry. I just spoiled the Three Little Pigs. Okay.
We're gonna have to post a warning on the site.
But, warning, spoiler for Three Little Pigs. But the point there is the repetition. So here's what I'm doing. I am doing these hauntings right from the start of this adventure. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're seeing your friends with worms crawling out of their mouths. Oh, it happens again here. Oh, it happens again here. Here it really happens. Oh, and they take 2d10 damage as these worms crawl out of their mouths. Right? So the repetition it's spooky. Yeah. It's scary. Oh my gosh, it's happening.
It has teeth. Yeah.
Right. And so that's building up from something that is spectral to something that is real. That gets the point across that, we were on the fringes of something strange. Now we're in the middle of something strange.
And that makes me think of the fact that in this chapter, while we are told that Oral sealed this place off, sometimes it's easy to forget that, right? That this is Oral's hand throughout, right? She created this psychic trauma because she actually feeds off of, at a divine level, these sort of feelings, right? This loneliness, this hopelessness, this, dying to the cold. Like, this is her meat and drink. This is the bedrock of her church. And so it makes sense for it to have teeth here and to have a stronger presence. And you shouldn't let the characters forget that this is Oral's hand at work. It's not just haunted caves, right? She made them haunted. It's her power.
Right. And the power that you see her have in real time is much less than the power she must have had when she did this. Because later it talks about her creating undead from dead bodies, right? She's creating flame skulls later. That's not something that she was doing when you fought her 2 sessions ago. So keep that in mind and, play up that things are going to get worse from here, not better.
Yeah. Then this adventure in this chapter adds an interesting monster that can appear throughout the caves. So this is Tekka Lee. You want to talk about this? How much do you want to talk about this? So Tekka Lee, it goes way back in literature to Edgar Allan Poe. His novel, the only novel he wrote, was called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. And in that novel, the protagonist, Arthur Gordon Pym, no correlation to Edgar Allan Poe, of course, is on a ship heading toward the South Pole. And they go through this sort of veil of snow, and everything is white. And the birds that are flying overhead are screaming Tekka Lee, Tekka Lee. So that's the first time it appears in literature. Later, a gentleman you may know by the name of Howard Philip Lovecraft wrote At the Mountains of Madness, where the Shoggoth that the characters encounter say Tekka Lee. So it has this horror basis in literature. In D&D now, this is a gnoll who has become a vampire. And do you want to talk about the gray box timeline? Yeah, so what we're told here is that in 1333 DR, which means it's about 156 years ago from the likely time that this adventure is intended to be run, which means that it's actually just before the timeline when the original AD&D Gray Box, the first Forgotten Realms box set, came out. So that's how old this knoll is.
Right.
Back then, right, Gray Box, just before the Gray Box, this knoll was hunting reindeer, or a bunch of gnolls were, and the Reged tribes in Icewind Dale banded together, and the gnolls retreated into an icy cleft, which is this place. Mm-hmm. And the gnolls allowed their leader, who was a fan of Yenogu, to eat them one by one. And at the end, you end up with just this one Fang of Yenogu gnoll. And Oral apparently enjoyed this and decided to imprison the gnoll in an icy tomb as an embodiment of winter's remorseless consumption. And so now you have this one gnoll vampire that remains locked away from the world until you go and open the waterfall with the poem.
There you go, opening the waterfall, letting the gnoll vampire out.
And I like this strategy. I'm curious what you think, that they tell us that Professor Scant, the orb, is an expert on vampires and will actually tell you all about vampire weaknesses. Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting twist, right? Right. First time you see one of these, because there are lesser versions, Professor Scant will give you the chapter on what vampires are, right, how you fight a vampire.
And what I'm doing with this is I am combining the horror with comedy. So as they're fighting this thing, as it's doing whatever it's going to do to the characters, Professor Scant is yelling, "How did that feel? What did that feel like?" Because it's I see it as this sort of, obviously it's not it's not a human, but it's got this human's intellect and human curiosity taken to the extreme of describe to me what this feels like as this creature is devouring your soul.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Just that the mechanic here is that what the vampire will do is you have a table with a D6 table with 6 locations where Tekeli can be encountered, and whenever you meet Tekeli there, they will attack you, try to drain your resources, and whenever they take 20 damage, they'll turn into mist and vanish to appear again.
Yep.
The table is interesting. What I would simply do is I would probably have it show up at all these locations. I mean, I don't, because what I don't know that I want to do is roll randomly and, it's at H36, so you only meet it at H36.
Mm-hmm.
That takes away from it. I would just say that each of those locations, unless the party's too beat up, have it show up and retreat. That's the whole point of this attack and run. Mm-hmm. And the places where it can show up tend to be neat places for it to show up that are interesting sort of battles and scenes. Yeah. So I would make the most of it. I don't know how you feel about it.
I feel the exact same way. If you're going to make the horror of this stand out, I love the concept. I think you as the DM are going to need to take more of a heavy hand in where it appears and how it reacts and even how strong it is. Because what the text says is when it takes 20 points of damage, it goes into mist and disappears. Well, I think it starts with 90 hit points maybe against a level 8 party, unless there's so much going on around it that the players are distracted. The first character might do 20 points of damage. That doesn't really terrify a group of players when this big bad monster, the warlock steps up and casts a spell. Oh, did I do 20 points of damage? Oh, it turns to gas and goes away. You didn't even get a chance to see it. So you might have to massage this a bit to bring this feeling of it doesn't have to be indestructible, but it can't be such a pushover that it appears, they do 20 damage, it goes away before it can even attack. It appears again, you do 20 points of damage, it goes away and comes back. That's like having a little brother or sister that's just constantly begging you for attention. That's not anything that's dangerous, right? So
right.
that's not the feeling that you want to get across with this.
It also doesn't do, unbelievable amounts of damage.
Right.
So I'm with you in that you don't want to show up and do very little damage and then immediately have to retreat. So yeah, beef this thing up. Don't let it just be killed and knocked into mist. It can leave and retreat when it has done what you need it to do narratively, right? The other thing here is that and maybe I don't know this well enough, but the shape changer feat uses its action to polymorph into a form, including Cloud of Mist. Polymorph requires concentration, right? So if it takes magical damage, it would revert. And I think if I'm understanding this correctly, and I would not allow this to be knocked out of mist form.
Yeah.
I had a game I played once where I turned into Cloud of Mist thinking I was going to get away, and someone hit me with magical damage and was like, "Well, isn't that concentration?" And don't you? And I was like, and we all looked it up and concluded, "Oh yeah, I guess I'm back to me." And it was so anticlimactic for what I thought I had very carefully planned. So I would not allow that, right? Like, whatever the actual rules are of this thing, when it turns into mist form, it should just be unstoppable. This thing is 156 euros. It's older than the gray box. Don't let it just be killed in a round,
Right. And, one of the other things of horror narratives is the sense of impending doom, but this because something happened, right? In The Thing or in other sorts of movies or media like that, the creature comes out, it stings you, and then it disappears. And because you're stung, you're slowly dying. You're slowly turning into something else. If you can make Tequila Lee have something like that, not horribly overpowering,
right?
But this sort of like the mummy rot sort of thing, where it's like, oh my gosh, I need to get healed. We don't have the healing we need, and I need to get healed within, a week, or something horrible is going to happen.
You could do that with the Sickening Gaze. So it has this hyena or vampire form, target a humanoid it can see within 30 feet, con save, or you're poisoned for 24 hours. That it could be more than poisoned, right? It could be a sort of draining.
Right.
And you could also do something like maybe if you short rest, you actually take damage instead of heal. Right. So you don't want to short rest. And even if you don't short rest, if your friends do, right, like that would happen, or just something like that. I agree with you. Like that would be a great evocative feel from this thing that would really up your game.
Yep. So that way it comes in, it does its thing, whether bite or sickening gaze or whatever, and then it goes away right away. And just that one round it was there and did that thing, did this horrible thing to one of them. Yeah. Then it comes back 3 rooms later, does the same thing, and then leaves to someone else. Oh, now they're in this situation. That is that's horror. That is what horror. That's what brings an element of horror to this narrative that may otherwise be lacking.
Yeah, and absolutely. So I would pump this up heavily, and I've had a lot of fun when I designed custom creatures that could easily get away from characters and attack them again, and sort of mimicked things like the movie Alien. Mm-hmm. Those were really, really memorable games, but they must be able to 100% get away from the party. Mm-hmm. And you can come up with whatever rules, fake it till you make it, allow that, because that's the crux of how you deliver on that experience. And this is an important reminder that these adventures are yours. You don't have to follow the text. Mm-hmm. And this is a great example where don't just follow that text and be really disappointed with this vampire that's supposed to deliver a cool thing. Deliver the cool thing. Yeah. It
can turn into a mist cloud anytime it takes damage. Yeah, it can as a reaction to it. Boom.
Yeah, perfect. Right.
And then you
move
are
at speed.
Yep.
Whatever.
And it can go through cracks, right? So and everything is cracked ice around here. Including the floor. So boom, there you go. But again, don't it shouldn't be rocks fall, everybody dies.
Yeah.
It just should deliver that sort of horror feel that you might be going for.
And then you can do things like just have a mist kind of go through a room. Mm-hmm. And everybody freaks out, but it's not the vampire.
Yeah,
it's not Tequila.
Exactly. I mean, you want a mist flows into the room. Roll initiative. what do? Everyone starts throwing magic at this, and that too gets across the point of not only are the characters paranoid, the players are paranoid. That gets across that feeling of paranoia pretty quickly.
Yeah, and then you have things like there are those Reamer has pools that have heat to them, so there can be mist all around there. So they're just waiting for the vampire to also show up, but doesn't. Yeah. Or does, either way, right? Right when they think it's not showing up, that's when you hit them with it too. Right?
Yep, exactly. All right. Well, we're at the hour mark, so I think next time we will hit the highlights of the Caves of Hunger, all 39 rooms of them.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, thank you all for listening. Thank you to our patrons for supporting us monetarily. If you would like to become a patron for the show, you can do so by going to patreon.com/MMP. Teos, where can people find you on the interwebs?
I'm at NewBDM. No, wait. At AlphaStream. And you can find me on the Misdirected Mark forums, my blog at alphastream.org.
And I am at Slyflourish. At Shawn Merwin. Or you can go to those forums at forums.misdirectedmark.com. Or you can follow the podcast Twitter at MasteringDND. Mastering Dungeons is a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs. So, Mr. Abadia, what should we do now?
Let's go stab at some monsters that just turn into mist and fade away.
I'm scared.